Good afternoon, Facebook friends and YouTube followers. This is Rich again, back for your second video blog of the day for Tuesday, November 11th, 2014, around 5:11 p.m. in Billerica, Massachusetts. Sun went down. It was 60 degrees today. It was a nice fall day, not too much wind and stuff. Perfect, but the temperature is going to go down, and I think the next several days and maybe a few weeks we could be looking at below average temperatures. Highs might not reach 40 next week, the entire week. That's the truth, I hear. Some news to report. Les Habs have traded their winger Travis Mont to the Dallas Stars for veteran defenseman Sergei Gonchar. That's a good move by Les Habs, and they're beefing up on the defense. And also, WWE Hall of Famer Jim Ross has signed a deal with Global Force Wrestling to call the New Japan pay-per-view Wrestle Kingdom 9 in January. That's a great move by Global Force Wrestling, which is owned by former WCW and WWE superstar Jeff Jarrett. Good for that. Good for JR to finally get back in the wrestling business to call matches for play-by-play. He's a real ass behind the microphone. He's one of the best announcers in pro wrestling history. And that's about it on that. My next subject is about the history of NHL expansion from 1967 to date. NHL from 1942-43 through 1966-67 only had 6 teams. It was the original 6 teams in Boston Bruins, Montreal Canadiens, New York Rangers, Toronto Maple Leafs, Detroit Red Wings, and Chicago Blackhawks. 25 years, there were only 6 NHL teams during that period. This was not really the original 6 NHL teams, but everybody calls them the original 6. Some people call it the surviving 6 because those teams survived the Great Depression, and stuff like that, which there was a lot of NHL teams that folded, like the Montreal Maroons, the original Ottawa Senators / St. Louis Eagles, the Pittsburgh Pirates / Philadelphia Quakers, and the New York Americans, which I mentioned yesterday. And for 25 years, the NHL didn't want to expand. They got some applications for expansion teams in the late 40s. They granted a conditional franchise to Cleveland because Cleveland had an AHL team, the Cleveland Barons, and I think in the late 40s they challenged Stanley Cup winners a couple of times to a game to determine a real hockey champion, and the NHL granted a conditional franchise to Cleveland, but Detroit and Chicago got mad because they thought if Cleveland was added to the NHL that it would take away from their profits. And also the early 50s, the NHL received an application for an expansion team in Philadelphia, but it was blocked because New York Rangers said that would eat away at their profits. And also during the 50s, NHL received applications for teams in Los Angeles and San Francisco, but they were denied by the NHL because many of the owners, the 6 owners, wanted to keep the league small. But the 60s, that was a different story, because in the 60s there was a thing with television was getting big. Television rights for sports leagues were getting big, and the Major League Baseball, NFL, the AFL, and NBA were getting so much money for television rights, and the NHL needed to expand, and the networks would not show the NHL unless if they added teams. All 6 NHL owners were very reluctant about expanding from the original 6, but there was rumors about a rival minor league, the Western Hockey League. They were talking about getting a contract from like a television network. I heard CBS back in the 60s, and the Western Hockey League was a minor hockey league, but they were becoming major. They were adding major cities with big-sized populations like Los Angeles, San Francisco, Houston, Dallas, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington. Then the NHL owners had to do something about that. They said they decided for expansion to start in mid-60s. They wanted to add teams in 1964-65 to Los Angeles and San Francisco, but they needed some time for that, and they looked in 1967 as a date to add 6 more teams. They got applications from all over the United States and Canada. They got 5 applications for a potential franchise in Los Angeles. They got 1 in the Bay Area, San Francisco. They got 1 in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Another 1 in Baltimore, Buffalo, New York, Vancouver, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Baltimore, Louisville, St. Louis, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia. When it was all said and done, the NHL added 6 teams for the 1967-68 season. The Pittsburgh Penguins, the Philadelphia Flyers, the St. Louis Blues, the Minnesota North Stars, the Los Angeles Kings, and the Oakland Seals. All 6 teams were put in the Western Division of the NHL. They kept the original 6 teams like in the same division. The Eastern Division, which was Boston, Montreal, Toronto, Detroit, Chicago, and New York. They were all kept in the same division, which got a lot of people mad. They should, in my opinion, they should have had like Chicago and Detroit in the Western Division and had Pittsburgh and Philadelphia in the Eastern Division. That would have made sense, but the NHL just wanted to keep all the original 6 teams in one division. And the expansion paid off for the NHL because CBS Television gave the NHL a contract to televise regular season games, including the playoffs and Stanley Cup Finals. They got some money for that, but the disadvantage of this, it would have guaranteed like a Stanley Cup Finals for one of the teams out west to get to face off against the original 6 teams. And the first 3 years of this system that happened, St. Louis Blues won the Western Division Championship, but they got swept each time for the Stanley Cup Finals. 2 in 68-69 against the Montreal Canadiens, in 1970 against Boston Bruins. But it was not. But the expansion teams weren't as financially solid as they were. In 1968, the Oakland Seals were almost on the verge of bankruptcy, and they were going to move to Vancouver, British Columbia, but it was blocked by the owners, especially Toronto and Montreal, because they did not want to see their 50-50 share of Hockey Night in Canada contract get gobbled up for a Vancouver franchise. Plus, in addition, I heard something that CBS wanted a team, 2 California teams, so they were kept in with new local ownership. 1970, NHL expanded 2 more teams. They added the Buffalo Sabres and the Vancouver Canucks. And Buffalo and Vancouver played in the Eastern Division, and Chicago moved to the Western Division. That was, that should have been Chicago and Vancouver, and you had to probably send somebody out east, probably Philadelphia or Pittsburgh. And then that worked out pretty good, the expansion. And 1972, the NHL expanded to 2 more teams. This was not really a planned expansion, but the WHA, the World Hockey Association, was starting up, and they had plans to put a team in New York Nassau Coliseum, which was being built, but the NHL put the New York Islanders and the Atlanta Flames in they put the Islanders in the Eastern Division and Atlanta in the Western Division, so there was 16 teams in the NHL. And in 1974, the NHL expanded 2 more teams to 18. They added the Washington Capitals and Kansas City Scouts, and they divided the leagues. They realigned it, put in conferences. Prince of Wales Conference was the Adams Division and Norris Division, and the Campbell Conference was the Smythe Division and the Patrick Division, so 18 teams. And in 1976, the NHL was going to expand to 20 teams. They granted conditional franchises to Seattle and Denver, and there was going to be more expansion in 1978 and 80, but that had to be stopped because a lot of NHL teams were not on financial solid ground. 1975, the Pittsburgh Penguins were under Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and they were going to be moved to Seattle. And also the Kansas City Scouts were in serious financial trouble. In 1976, they moved to Denver to become the Colorado Rockies. And Oakland Seals, which were renamed the California Golden Seals, were actually owned by Charlie Finley, a former owner of the A's, but he lost big time money, so he just decided to sell it to the NHL. And in 1976, they moved to Cleveland to become the Cleveland Barons. NHL stopped the expansion for a while, and then in 1978, the Cleveland Barons was folded into the Minnesota North Stars, so there were 17 teams. In 1979, the NHL merged with the WHA, and they added 4 teams. The Winnipeg Jets, the Edmonton Oilers, the Hartford Whalers, and the Quebec Nordiques, so they added 21 teams. And for the next 12 years, the NHL was kept at 21 teams. This was probably the best NHL hockey they had, but for years the NHL did not have a national television contract, network television contract, and that was hurting them for getting on television because they only had 14 U.S. markets. So in 1991, they added a team in the Bay Area again, the San Jose Sharks. The next year, they expanded to 24 teams, adding Tampa Bay and Ottawa. Good because the NHL was expanding back into Canada. And also, they added a Florida team, Tampa Bay, which was pretty good. The next year, they added 2 more teams to Florida Panthers and Anaheim Mighty Ducks. And the NHL realigned the conferences to go back to Eastern and Western conferences, having the Northeast Division, the Atlantic Division in the Eastern Conference, and the Central Division and the Pacific Division in the Western Conference. And then the NHL added 4 more teams by the end of the century, 1998. They expanded to Nashville Predators. They realigned more again. They had 5-team divisions in each of, and 15 teams in each conference. The conferences were Northeast, Atlantic, and Southeast, and the Western Conference was the Central, the Northwest, and the Pacific. Nashville joined in 1998. They joined the Central Division. 1999, the Atlanta Thrashers joined. They went into the Southeastern Division. In 2000, it was the Minnesota Wild, who replaced the Minnesota North Stars, who moved to Dallas in 1993. And also the Columbus Blue Jackets went into the Central Division of the Western Conference. And the NHL's been 30 teams ever since, and they've been, since then, no new expansion teams, even though there's talk about NHL expansion. And I think eventually NHL expansion is going to happen. They're probably going to have to do 32 teams, in my opinion. That's about it. There's rumors about them wanting to add 4 more franchises and stuff like that. But I think 32 is a good round number. And the NHL expansion since 1967 has had very successful. Some great teams came into the NHL expansion. Some teams didn't even make it, but it was good for the hockey to expand into new markets, because like the Sun Belt of the United States, even though it hasn't been successful, you could credit that in 1988 when Wayne Gretzky was traded from the Edmonton Oilers to Los Angeles Kings. That was a hockey boom for Southern United States for hockey. Credit Wayne Gretzky for that. And the main reason why the NHL needed to add these teams because of a national television contract with a network, because that was lacking in the 80s and stuff, and they have now a great deal with NBC, NBCSN. I think part of the deal, they have to keep these teams in southern United States like Phoenix, Dallas, Raleigh, Florida, Tampa Bay, Nashville, because it brings money to the league, in my opinion. Even though the fans don't really like them having the teams in there, but I think the NHL has been. I give like NHL expansion since 1967. I give it like a B, and that's about it on that. I'll be back later, Facebook friends and YouTube followers, for one more video blog of the night. That's going to be about Dwight Evans, former Red Sox outfielder. Don't forget, Facebook friends, YouTube followers. I'm continuing to have this thing grow and grow. I'm getting more likes on Facebook and YouTube. Thanks to you, Facebook friends, YouTube followers, these videos have been more successful. See you later, Facebook friends and YouTube followers. Bye now.